So the third grade of clearness gives us a method for experimental clarification of our concepts. The third grade gives us a way to experimentally clarify what we mean by a term, because there are things that we can do to test it and observe what sensible effects follow from the test. This philosophical account Peirce is giving aids us because it shows us that testing, which is a crucial tool of science, is also an adaptive tool for survival and for the philosophical analysis of meaning. So Peirce is folding philosophy and science and meaning clearness, or meaning clarity and meaning, into a method which is crucial for practical survival as well as theoretical advances. And I think it's worth thinking for a minute about this survival point. Peirce's overall framework is Darwinian. He sees us as creatures who have a number of different abilities that we can use to adapt and survive. And as we struggle to get by, and we're using our big brains and our language as tools, we see. So consider the sequence, right? We find ourselves in doubt because of a situation. Maybe it's a danger. This produces a kind of what he's called an irritation, and this motivates us towards active thinking or inquiry, and this leads to a belief, right? And then thought is at rest. So that could be, the danger of a tiger, right, in coming at us, and that's more than an irritation, but this is just a technical word. So that irritation says, all right, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? This leads to thinking like I could go here, I could go there, I could hide, all of the things you can imagine. And then assuming that we've figured it out, that leads to a state of belief, like hiding's the best thing to do. And that puts us at rest. Once we have a belief which comes about through this process, that belief can be applied as a rule for future action, right? So once we know how to deal with tigers, or once we know how to deal with stuck doors, or once we know how to deal with frozen computer screens, or whatever it is, once we figure that out, we have a belief, and that belief is ready to serve as a quick mode of action the next time it happens. Of course, a new doubt can crop up, right? That belief won't be adequate to, and that will lead to an inquiry to either modify or change the belief that we had in the past, right? So belief for Peirce is both a stopping place and a starting place for our adaptive behavior, right? It's a stopping place when it resolves the doubt that we were having, and it's a starting place for action and for future solutions to future doubts. Okay. Now, for one belief to differ from another belief, the habits that they produce must differ. So this is a very important distinction, because Peirce is saying we can determine what a belief means based on what habits and actions it produces. And if two beliefs have exactly the same outcomes in terms of habits and actions, they're the same belief, right? So there's a criterion of synonymy there in Peirce. So a belief A is distinguished from a belief B, if you will, because belief A produces habit 1 and belief B produces habit 2, right? If you believe something different, you do something different, right? So that's a very important pragmatic upshot of this principle. Now, in the next part of the article, Peirce goes ahead and shows how this pragmatic principle can be applied to various things that we encounter. And the first example he gives comes from the phenomenon of transubstantiation, right? And transubstantiation is the process by which the wine and the wafer in the Catholic ceremony are turned into a different substance entirely. They're turned into the body and the blood of Christ. And so Peirce asks this question. He says, well, what is transubstantiation? What does it mean pragmatically? And how can the pragmatic principle, or the third grade of clearness, help clarify what transubstantiation means, right? How do we clarify a religious concept with the pragmatic principle? And he goes through it and he assesses it on the different levels. And I'm going to leave this for discussion, right? So for discussion, how does the pragmatic principle apply to the concept of transubstantiation according to Peirce? Okay, so we'll talk about this. Another concept he applies the pragmatic principle to is the concept of what it means for something to be hard. How do we apply the three grades of clearness to the concept hard? Right? Well, if we apply the first grade of clearness to the term hard, we might ask the question, well, can I identify a hard object? Can I tell the difference between hard and soft objects, right? Without necessarily having to give lots of reasons for it, but the first test is just familiarity. And I think I can tell what hardness is, okay? At least at the first grade. The second grade of clearness for hardness would come back to something like a definition, right? Can I frame a verbal definition of what it means for something to be hard? For example, hardness is the capacity to resist pressure, right? That's the beginning of a definition. The third grade of clearness, as applied to the concept of hard, would ask the question of what are the future expectations to hypotheses that I can have concerning the term hard. So, for example, I might say something like, if this wall is hard, right, and I pound my fist into it, it will hurt my fist, right? Or if this table is hard, I could put a plate on it without the plate falling through, right? So it's this way of clarifying the concept in terms of all of the different possible conditions under which it would, right, yield particular sensible results. Right? So a complete clarification of a concept can be done, Peirce says, by listing conditional propositions which would tell what effects my actions would have if the concept applies. Right? And this is a kind of experimentalist's view of the content of propositions. Right? Now, on this third grade of meaning clarification for Peirce, we can see that it's derived from the scientific method. We can see that scientific experimentation is the process that he has in mind, one which derives predictions from hypotheses and then tests the hypotheses by testing their predictions. Right? So the pragmatic test of meaningfulness is properly applied to terms that are embedded in propositions. Right? So the pragmatic test of meaningfulness is properly applied to terms that are embedded in propositions, okay, rather than just terms in isolation. Right? And the propositions that they're applied to are hypothetical in character. Okay? So if we ask, what does hard mean? That translates to the question, well, what expectations would one draw from hypotheses of the form X is hard? So hardness, what it means for something to be hard, becomes a series of conditionals. If X is hard, then, right, my fist gets hurt if I punch it, or my plate can rest on it without falling through, or, right, any number of conditional results. So the pragmatic maxim supplements traditional methods of clarifying the meaning of concepts, right? Just familiarity or definitions, because it gives us a way to test out the meaning of the concept in practical action with sensible results. Now, Peirce says that this third grade of meaning clarity was already introduced to the world along with the scientific method, but he's just being explicit about it. He's explicating it as a method that philosophy can benefit from. Okay. Now, the last concept that he applies the method to is sort of long and convoluted, and I'm not going to go into it into too much detail, but it's the concept of reality. So he applies the concept or rather the pragmatic maxim and principle to reality, and he sees that the clarification of what we mean by reality depends upon how reality might have general practical effects upon our habits and our actions. And that's the only way that we can form a concept of it based on verifiable effects. Right? And truth, the concept of truth, is one which follows from the concept of reality. So for Peirce, truth is defined by reference to the long-run convergence of opinion among responsible inquirers. It's not independent of all thinking, but it's independent of what any individual may think at any particular time. So what truth is for Peirce is what we would believe in the long run as the views of human inquirers or rational inquirers converge on the one reality, the one world that hypothetically we assume there is. So this concludes the second lecture on the second article of Peirce's 1877-1878 papers, Fixation of Belief and How to Make Our Ideas Clear. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope we can have further discussion about it.